The wind came down from the northern ridge like it had something to say, cold, unflinching, and full of judgment. Weston Clay pulled his collar tighter and nudged his horse forward with a grunt. The animal was the only creature he spoke to these days, and even then it was rarely more than a few words. Behind him, the town of Red Hollow sat like a nest of cowards and pew-warmers, too afraid to face the truth, too comfortable hiding behind fences when the world demanded decency ahead. At the edge of the meadow, where the frost had made the grass brittle, something fluttered. It wasn't a leaf nor cloth. It moved with the weight of something that remembered pain. Weston narrowed his eyes. A red shawl was caught on a fence post like a flag, and beneath it, two figures slumped and silent, lashed to the wooden rail like broken scarecrows in the snow. He stopped his horse. They were girls, one nearly grown, the other still on the cusp of girlhood. Their faces were painted in dust and shame, their hands bound, their mouths pressed shut not by gag or force, but by pride. They had been left there to freeze like animals, a warning, perhaps, or some twisted form of entertainment. The older one looked up, her dark eyes meeting Weston's. She didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She simply saw him. He dismounted with a creak of leather. Not a word passed his lips, just the sound of his knife cutting through rope. The younger one whimpered and leaned into his chest, unsure if he was real. The elder girl held still until the last knot was severed. Then, with trembling legs, she stood, chin lifted, defiant still in her posture. "Who did this?" Weston asked, his voice dry as pine bark. Neither girl answered. "Didn't need to," he muttered under his breath. He turned toward the town, his shoulders hunched as if something bitter inside him was waking. The last time Weston Clay cared about anyone, he buried her 2 winters later and vowed never to let another soul close. But something about the way that girl refused to fall lit didn't feel like charity. It felt like a reckoning. They walked behind him in silence, snow crunching softly beneath their bare feet. When they reached his horse, the older girl stopped, her hand resting on the saddle. She didn't ask where they were going. She simply nodded once. Weston lifted the younger girl onto the horse. She held his coat with one hand and her sister's braid with the other. The ride back to his cabin took 2 hours. It snowed halfway through. No one spoke, but the silence wasn't hollow. It pulsed. He opened the door to his cabin without flourish. 1 room half firewood, half solitude. He'd built it for 1 man and 1 ghost, not for 2 girls and whatever guilt had crawled into his ribs. Still, he lit the hearth and brought out 3 cups, poured water from the kettle, handed the girl slices of bread. The younger one devoured it, tears slipping down her cheeks. The older ate slow. Her hand shook, but she kept her back. "What's your name, Weston?" The younger one answered. "Mina." He looked at the elder girl. She stared back at him. "Tala," she said, voice low like a creek in drought. I nodded. "I'm Weston." Tala didn't thank him, didn't soften, but her eyes flickered to the fire as if just maybe it belongs to her, to now. By morning, Ma was asleep on a straw mattress beside Thea. Tala sat awake carving something small from a twig, her hands steady despite the swelling. Weston sipped his coffee with both boots on the floor, unsure why the silence between them didn't itch. "You ain't the first one I sit tied up like that," he said eventually. Tala didn't look up. "We might be the first they left for He didn't ask who. He didn't eat names. There was a kind of cruel tithet, didn't require signatures. Just salams from those who should have stopped it. "I've got stew," he said. She nodded once. He burned it. Min Lefedwin, her spoon sank into the mush. I can help, Tala said softly. He handed her ladle without a word. That evening, Weston rode to town. Folks parted like it was disease. The bartender scowled Edwin. He ordered sugar and cloth. At the general store, a woman whispered, "He's keeping them in his home. Can you believe it?" He turned his back to Thea. At the saloon, a ranch chuckled. "Didn't know you were into scalps and savages, Clay." Weston didn't speak. He grabbed the man by the collar and shoved him against the wall. Teeth clenched. "Say it again." The man choked in his tongue. "Didn't think so." He left with fists tight and ears burning. Theatown could rot for all he cared. What mattered was the image burned in his mind. Two girls tied to splintered wood, wind clawing their hair. Back at Thekabin, Tala was boiling water. Min had drawn small pictures in the ash by the flowers, stars, a horse with stick legs. Weston laid down the sugar and cloth for tea. He said, awkward, "Talagavi," a small nod. "Thank you." It was the first time she said it. Days passed, then a week. Weston built a second cut. Tala fixed a broken shutter. Ma began limping less, though she still clung to her sister at night. One morning, Weston found a carving on his porch post. A horse, clean and perfect, its mane braided with river. He touched it tense, didn't speak of it. That night, Tala stirred the stew. Her eyes caught us. For the first time, there was. "You remind me of my father," she said. "Debt, not yet. Just far hadn't press." He only nodded. Outside, the wind stopped. For the first time in months, it felt like spring might come. The next knock on the door came a week. Pastor Elijah Boone, with his coat buttoned high and a Bible in his fist. He didn't step inside. "There's talk," he began. Weston crossed his arms. "Oasis, they're not safe here. They weren't safe out there." Elijah glanced at Desno, then back at the man before him. "A marriage," he muttered, "would quiet things." Weston stared this, about God, August. Elijah cleared his throat. "Sometimes they rhyme." When he left, Weston found Tala brushing Ma's hair near the fire. She looked up and read his face. What did they want? He didn't. She nodded anyway. "Doesn't matter. You didn't find us to give us back." That night, Weston sat by the fire long after the girls had gone to sleep. The carved horse stared back from Thepid. He picked up the flute Tala had left near the hearth, her father's entry to play. The sound was awful. Butit filled the cabin. Minya giggled in her sleep. The next morning, he left before sunrise, returned midday. In Hissians, a parcel. He set it on Talascott. She opened it slowly. A dress, cotton, blue, simple, modest. She touched the fabric with reverence, not for its worth, but for what it meant. She looked at him, eyes questioning. Hadn't smile, just met her gaze. She folded the dress carefully as if folding a vow. That evening they stood beneath pine behind the cabin. Ma placidly blooming flowers in Tala's hair. Boone arrived without speaking. He performed the vows without sermon. There was no ring, no kiss on the mouth, just a quiet promise between survivors. "I wasted to a fence like a dog," Tala said, "but you looked at me like Apperson." Weston said nothing, but he took her hand like it was the last good thing'd ever hold. The town watched from a distance. No torches, just tension and folded arms and muttered oaths, but Nonna stepped forward. not now, that night. Aswine danced through pine needles. Tala sat beside the fire, Weston's coat around her shoulders. Min slept curled near the hearth. "You weren't kind at first," Tala said, stirring tea. "I didn't know how," Weston murmured. Shell looked at him for a long while, then leaned her head on his shoulder. "Now you do." Outside, a fox passed through there. Inside, no one felt cold. And yet, the town had not forgotten, nor had it forgiven. A man who brought home 2 Indian girls, made one his wife, and let other laugh like the world hadn't tried to break her. That man made people uncomfortable, especially the kind of people who needed someone to look down in. The next knock on the door wouldn't Elijah. It'd be someone with a badge, a rifle. But for tonight, the fire crackled gently. The stew simmered. Her hand stayed in his, and Weston Clay, once rough, once rude, had learned the quiet shape of grace. The wind whispered some mythings through the trees.